If you live in a high-density city, there's a really good chance you live in a strata-titled building. But, have you ever actually stopped to think about how it's legally possible to just own a slice of the sky? Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to decode the exact legal blueprint that makes it all possible, the Land Titles Strata Act 1967. I mean, seriously, when you buy an apartment, what exactly are you buying? Historically, real estate meant owning the literal dirt beneath your feet, right? But in a high-rise, you obviously don't own the ground. Legally speaking, you hold the title to an empty, floating volume of space. It's a total mind-bender. It requires a complete shift in how we actually perceive real estate ownership. Okay, let's dive into this and map out the anatomy of a strata scheme. First, we'll look at the magic of strata title, then define common property, jump into the management corporation, explore some invisible rights, and finally wrap up with redevelopment rules. So, part 1. The magic of strata title, or slicing the sky. This whole act relies on the concept of a stratum to essentially stack and divide a single piece of land into hundreds of distinct homes. To break this jargon down into plain English, a stratum is quite literally the 3D volume of space that you own. And it's pretty wild. It can be right on the surface of the land, way up above it, or even below ground. You literally own perfectly delineated dimensions of empty space. Now, once that 3D space is officially surveyed, mapped out, and finally registered on the master blueprint, which we call the strata title plan, it officially becomes a lot. That's your apartment, your private, legally recognized sanctuary. But wait, what about your designated parking space? Well, the Act calls that an accessory lot. It's basically a space meant to be used alongside your main lot. But here's a super critical detail. Under Section 15 of the Act, it is actually a legal offense to sell your accessory lot independently from your main lot. No way around it, they are permanently tied together. So actually, scratch that idea of making a quick buck selling off your parking space to a stranger. Let's move on and see how this builds in Part 2, defining the common property, the classic, yours versus ours. We really need to clearly draw the legal boundary here. Your lot is the space for your exclusive habitation, period. But the absolute second something becomes a structural element, or a pipe, or a space enjoyed by 2 or more lots, boom, it becomes common property. We are talking about the shared structural integrity of the entire building. It's brilliant just how incredibly specific the Act gets about what counts as common property. Obviously, it's the foundations, the load-bearing walls, the roof, but it even explicitly loops in things you probably wouldn't think twice about: the central air conditioning system, the fire sprinklers, even the waterproof membrane attached to an external wall. Basically, if it services more than one unit, it belongs to everyone. Now, here is a surprisingly quirky did you know fact tucked away in Section 3, subsection 2. Who actually owns the exterior windows? Well, it depends entirely on whether they move. Seriously, if an exterior window has movable parts, like louvers, casement, or sliding windows, it is legally part of your lot. But if it's a fixed, non-movable exterior window, it's common property. How crazy is that? Moving right along to Section 3, the Management Corporation, which acts as a mini-government. The very second the strata title application is registered, all the lot owners instantly and automatically form a governing body. But remember, the common property isn't owned by some faceless corporate entity. It is owned by the owners themselves as tenants in common. Your specific stake in all of this is determined by your share value. This magic number completely dictates your voting power and your proportional share of all those shared spaces. And while we're on the topic of ownership, there's this fascinating little planning condition under Section 8. Sometimes, the authority legally mandates that 30% of a development's floor area must be owned by a single person for a full 10 years. The registrar will flat out refuse to register any sale that breaks this rule. It's essentially a really powerful mechanism to guarantee long-term stability in the building's governance right from the start. Now, what's really interesting is coming up in Section 4, invisible rights and easements. We'll call this the invisible web. Okay, so there is this totally invisible web of legal forces that prevents your neighbors from, well, literally bringing down the house. Because your property physically touches others, the law creates what are called implied easements. To translate that legalese into plain English, it means you legally rely on the floors below you for physical support, under Section 16. You absolutely rely on the floors above you for shelter, under Section 17. And under Section 18, you have a guaranteed implied right for your water and power to safely pass through all those shared pipes. But the Act actually goes even further than that. Section 19 legally protects your right to the uninterrupted sunlight coming straight through your windows. These invisible rights are so fundamental, they are completely enforceable without even needing to be written onto your specific certificate of title. Finally, let's wrap up with Section 5, Redevelopment and Collective Rules, changing the blueprint. So, what happens when you decide you want to alter a highly interdependent structure like this? As you'd expect, it requires some pretty strict procedures. If you want to divide or combine lots under Section 12, you really have to run a gauntlet. First, you need authority approval. Then, if you so much as touch common property, you need the management corporation's blessing. After that, you must file an amended schedule to prove your new share values perfectly equal the old ones, and only then can you register the application. So, the crucial point is that altering shared spaces is serious business. If the management corporation wants to transfer or lease any part of the shared common property, say selling off a tiny piece of the garden, Section 23 dictates they definitely can't just do it on a whim. They need a massive, overwhelming 90% resolution from the owners to make that happen. We've seen today how just a few lines of legislation can literally carve up the sky. This act clearly defines what's yours, what's ours, and exactly how we are invisibly bound together for support, for shelter, and for survival. So, next time you look up at a towering high-rise, will you just see a bunch of concrete? Or will you see the invisible legal web of the Strata Act holding the whole thing together? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer today, and keep looking up.